Hello, my name is Jason Foster. I'm an Edmonton-based beer writer and beer educator. And I want to chat with you a little bit about Trappist beer. Trappist beers are beer made by monks, but the story is far more interesting than that. The term Trappist is actually a very carefully guarded phrase. Only 8 breweries in the world are currently allowed to call themselves Trappist. And Trappist beers should not be confused with the term Abbey ales, which are beer made by other breweries of the same general style. To be called a Trappist beer, you have to meet 4 criteria. First, you must be a non-profit operation. Secondly, and this is a key one, is the beer needs to be brewed by the monks themselves at the monastery. Third, the brewing of beer needs to be secondary to the overall monastic life and the purposes of their monastic life. Fourth, they have to meet a very rigorous standard of quality in terms of the beer. Currently, there are 6 monasteries in Belgium, and then 1 each in the Netherlands and Austria that have this designation. So all Trappist beer come from what we would generally call Belgian strong ales. And these beers are all sort of have a commonality in that they use a very particular type of yeast that gives them a spicy, earthy character not found in most beer. You'll find with Trappist beers that you'll get some odd names that you wouldn't be expecting. They'll call their beer a dubbel, or a trippel, or a quadrupel. Those are all just basically designations about the alcohol strength in the beer. A quadrupel generally is about twice as strong as a dubbel. Some of the monasteries use just a basic numbering system, 6, 8, 10, and 12. These are basically, again, just a measure of the alcohol strength in the beer. So they're just a general sense of what to expect. In general terms, a trippel is light in color, runs around 8 to 9% alcohol, and it has a very dry, spicy kind of finish to it. Doubles and quadruples, lighter and stronger respectively, tend to be darker, a little sweeter, tend to have sort of a molasses and brown sugar kind of character to them. So let's look at the 8 Trappist breweries. The oldest, which the monastery was formed in 1230, is Rochefort. Rochefort uses a numbering system. All of their beers are darker in color, and they have a 6, an 8, and 10. And they are noted to be a little bit sweeter, with a bit more of a fruity note to their beers in general. In contrast, the second largest of the Trappist breweries, Cuisine, is noted for a much spicier character in their beer. They tend to accent that yeast spiciness. Their system is that they actually tend to use the color of the label and the cap to define their beers. So for example, the Chimay White, which has a white label on it, is their trippel. The blue is their quadrupel, and the red is their double. The largest of the Trappist breweries is La Trappe, officially known as Koningshaven. They're also the Trappist brewery that's located in the Netherlands. They have a dubbel, a trippel, and a quadrupel in their lineup, but unlike the other Trappist breweries, they actually also occasionally produce one-off beers to mark special occasions and seasonal beers that you can only get from time to time, which most of the Trappist breweries don't do. The Trapp beers are known for their aggressive approach to these styles of beers. Their flavors tend to be a little more assertive and a little bolder than some of the other breweries that we're looking at. Since we've left Belgium, I might as well raise the Austrian Trappist brewery, which also happens to be the youngest of the Trappist breweries, receiving its designation only in 2012. Engenschel has 2 beers, and they deviate a bit from that naming system that I've been talking to you about. They have a quadrupel, which they call Gregorius, named after the very first monk in the abbey. And they have Bernal, which actually is, again, unusual to the others, is actually a single, or sometimes called an enkel. Their beer have a raw character to them and tend to edge towards that spicy yeast character. Returning to Belgium, we have Aschel. Aschel have 2 beers. And they both, under that naming system that we talked about, would be considered an 8. But what happens is that one of them is blonde and one of them is darker, brown color. Aschel beers tend to have that fruitiness that are reminiscent of a Rochefort, but they finish a little drier and a little sharper on your tongue as you finish the sip. What may be the most unique of the Trappist breweries is Orval. Orval makes only one beer, and so they just call it Orval. What makes Orval special is two things. First, they're the only of the Trappist breweries to employ the process of dry hopping, which means adding hops after fermentation is complete to create a bit more of a stronger hop flavor and aroma presence. And the second thing about it is that they add, in addition to beer yeast, they add an organism called Brettanomyces, which over time slowly develops a very musty, earthy, almost barnyard-like flavor and aroma to the beer. And trust me, you have to taste it to really understand that it actually is a very, very enjoyable flavor profile. The monastery that actually started brewing beer first was Westmalle. And they produce two beers for public consumption, a double and a triple. In fact, they're the first brewery in the world to have produced and sold the style of beer we now call triple. And today, it's still considered to be one of the finest examples of the style. In general, Westmalle beers tend to balance off a smooth body with a sharp, yeasty spiciness. I leave until last the most traditional and rarest of the Trappist breweries, Westvleteren. Westvleteren makes three beers, a 6, an 8, and a 12. However, normally in order to find this beer, you have to go to the monastery itself because the brewery only sells its beer out of the monastery gate in very, very small quantities. The monks in this monastery are very traditional in terms of how they approach brewing and fitting it into the rest of their life. However, Albertans and Canadians have the good fortune that in order to finance some significant renovations to the monastery, last year the monks made the decision to release a special batch of their 12 and release it to Canada. So we have the good fortune of being able to have at least an opportunity to drink one of what is some of the rarest beer in the world. Trappist beer are multi-layered, complex, and flavorful. And the stories behind them are fascinating. I hope that this short video has piqued your curiosity about the wonders of Trappist beer and that you start to try them. And I would encourage you to go through one by one and taste them all, because as you'll find, even though they're all very similar styles of beer, each one has its own unique character and personality that I think reflects the particular traditions of each monastery. Thank you.